everyone. Joel Williams here, content manager for Global Martial Arts University. And today I'm doing another student spotlight. Today I'm speaking with Brian Shulz, who's a blue belt in the Shotokan Karate program. And Brian, let's just kick off this interview by telling us some other things about yourself that you want to share. And we'll just get to know you a little bit.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come on here and do this interview. I think it's always important to see what the community has to say and get different voices and where we all come from. As Joel mentioned, my name is Brian Shulz. And during the day when I'm not training, my job is I'm a forensic chemist with the crime lab here in the New Orleans area, which is where I live. I'm also a husband. My wonderful wife is a fourth grade teacher, and I have a 6-year-old daughter. I like to say she's 6 going on 16. She keeps us busy, and she's smart as a whip. And I've been with the GMAU for, I believe it's been 5 years now. So I'm not exactly what you'd call the fastest progressing student, but I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with the program and everything that I've gotten out of it.
So did you have martial arts experience before GMAU?
When I was probably between the ages of 12 and 14, I was signed up, my mom signed me up and my brother to a Kuk Sool Won class. So for about those 2.5, 3 years, I was in a Kuk Sool Won program. And then my studies in high school and all of the extracurriculars that I was in, I just kind of fell out of it. And that coupled with the fact that when I was younger, I wasn't particularly the most athletically built person. So all those things kind of played into me dropping out of it. But there was always a desire to get back into martial arts training. It's something that I felt that I really wanted to do. If for nothing else than to prove to myself that I could do it.
That sounds very similar to my story. When I was in high school, I trained in Shotokan Karate and dabbled in some other Okinawan martial arts. And I really enjoyed it and I always said I'm going to get back to this, but I was busy with school and work and ultimately going to college and that sort of thing. And just having fun, you know, as an adolescent, right, in my teenage years. So I wasn't really super focused. But it was when I was in my 30s, actually, that my son started Kuk Sool Won. And he and I trained together for over 5 years. And he got his junior black belt and I got my black belt. So you and I are kind of like different sides of the same coin a little bit.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. So tell me how you came to find Global Martial Arts University.
Okay. So my daughter was born in 2015. And right around that time, I had actually, it's kind of a funny story. I had been in a dart league for a while. And with my daughter being born, I just knew that I wouldn't have the time to commit to that anymore. But I still wanted something that I could do for myself, just to have that time to myself so that I didn't become overwhelmed with everything else. And so I started just looking up different schools and dojos and styles that were offered in my area. And then when I started thinking about the responsibilities and the weight that comes with being a dad, I just wasn't sure I would have time to go outside of the house and to train in that environment. And then also with the full-time job. And at the time, I was also pastoring a church. So there was a lot that was going on. And so I just kind of looked up, I think I probably just Googled like online martial arts schools just to see if something like that existed. And I came across the GMAU and I went back and forth with Sensei Michael for a while, asking questions about what was involved and all that. And finally, I signed up, and I believe it was the beginning of 2017. And it's been an absolutely great experience for me to be able to either to fit the training in on my schedule. to be able to train early in the morning or later in the afternoon when my daughter's at her activities or my wife's not quite home from work yet, and just have that time to train. And so I'm forever grateful to them for starting this movement, and to see where it was when I started and to now the community that it is.
So what was the tipping point for you in your decision to just take the dive and try it out?
There were a couple things. The first was my desire to get back into martial arts. Another thing that was really heavy on me, what kind of came with the territory of being a soon-to-be father, and then by the time that I joined the GMAU, was a father. But I just was not in the physical shape that I wanted to be in, to know that later down the line, I want to be able to keep up with my daughter. And, while I'm only 35, some days I wake up and I feel 80. So, I wanted to be able to train myself to have that discipline, to have that mindset, and to kind of gain that patience that I would need, for the everyday life, and also to improve my own well-being.
So let me ask you, since you've been in the program, is there like one thing that stands out in your mind as like a major obstacle or significant obstacle you've had to overcome? Or is there maybe like a success that you've had in the program that you're really proud of?
Yeah. I'd say my biggest obstacle, and it's probably the same for a lot of students, especially the early levels, is my motivation. When I started, I was really gung-ho about it, really on board with it. And then you get to that point to where you've gone through all the classes a few times, you've gone through the lessons a few times, and now it's kind of on you to make the time to go through the Kihon and the kata in your own way and at your own pace. And it's a lot easier when you just hit play on a video and have Sensei John walk you through something, than it is to say, okay, today, this is what's on my list to train. I know I've got to work on my front kick, or I've got to work on my horse stance. It takes a lot of motivation and internal motivation to get to that point sometimes, just to be able to tie your belt and say, okay, let's go. So that's been kind of the biggest thing that I've overcome over time. And I've kind of overcome that by mixing in different trainings like strength training or endurance training. And so, for instance, instead of training in the Shotokan program every single day, I'll do a variation on that training. So I'll do movements like the punches or the kicks with the limb tied to a resistance band, just to strengthen those movements, to get an idea of what it is to have a force fighting you on that. Especially since as kind of stay-at-home practitioners, we don't always get that one-on-one hands-on work that we would if we were in a traditional dojo. So to be able to have that resistance, I found really helps. And then, like I said, just to change up the training. So one day I'll put the gi on and I'll go through all of my Kihon and katas, or the next day I might just wear something like a normal athletic kind of outfit and do some time on the standing bag, things like that. So what I found to get over the motivation hurdle was to just mix up the training. And then one of my biggest successes that comes to mind actually came out of a failure. I believe it was my test to go from yellow to orange belt. Sensei John had given me my feedback, and during that feedback, I just felt like I did not deserve to move up in that rank. And I didn't. So he asked me to redo some things and some things that I pointed out. And so following the resubmission, it was my back stance I was having trouble with. Being a taller guy and kind of slowly getting in shape later on, it's hard for me to get that back stance right all the time. But so I worked on it, resubmitted it, and I believe his comment was, "That's one of the best back stances I've seen in a long time." So it's one of those things where you kind of get into a cycle of the motivation leads to the successes, but also the failures, which then lead you back to the successes.
Yeah. So if there were someone watching this who's maybe got their eye on GMAU, they haven't quite made the commitment, you haven't tried, setting up the free beginners account. They're still kind of observing things. Or maybe the person who's at that point or who has just started a program, what tips or advice would you give to those two different people?
So the biggest thing that that I think kept me on the fence for the longest was the fact that I was seeing the whole picture as one thing. So the weight of being in a program and let's say that you talk to friends or family and they're like, well, did you ever reach your black belt, for instance? Like, because that's what a lot of people have in their minds as the ultimate, that there's a weight of expectation there. And so you kind of just sit on it and is this really going to work out for me? And I would say that the biggest thing for a new student or somebody that's thinking about it is to set small goals for yourself. Like, I'm going to train 1 day a week, or I'm going to train 2 days a week, instead of trying to see the whole picture of, well, I've got to reach this amount of time to get to test for the next belt level. And I think if especially as martial artists, if we can set small goals for ourselves and see those very small improvements over time, they begin to add up. And that's a lesson that I think you carry well outside of martial arts itself. Because I can tell you, when I started the program, my coordination was about that of a wet rock. And a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, I went and played volleyball with some friends. And again, I am not the most coordinated person in the world, but I was able to see how that coordination had changed, how I was more aware of my body dynamics and where I was in space. And I think the biggest thing on that is just to make those small goals in order to see those small improvements. And then one day you realize that you've come so far down the road, it's hard to remember not being able to stand on one foot. And so if you're on the fence or thinking about it, I'd say just go ahead and jump in and just start with the first lesson and make the goal just to get through that first lesson. And even if you don't go to the second one, just work on everything in that first lesson until you're comfortable enough to move on.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, one thing that I would take away from that, what you said is spot on in terms of setting small goals, reaching those successes. It's going to motivate you. But there's really something about being in the moment and just enjoying where you are right now.
Right.
Yes, there can be some anxiety and that sort of thing that comes along with getting ready for the next test or the next, belt progression, that sort of thing. But it's really important to just enjoy where you are along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I help new hires that we have at the Crime Lab, for instance. One of the biggest things that people get nervous about is having to testify in court.
Yeah.
And so the one guy that we hired a couple months ago, he's getting ready for his first court case. And he has a habit, and I had the same habit, so I recognize it to help him through it. But he has a habit of worrying about what they might ask or what he might mess up, instead of staying in that moment and just listening to the question. And it's the exact same principle here, to stay in that moment, to listen to what it is that your body's telling you.
Yeah.
And if you fail, what do you learn from that? Instead of worrying about, am I going to fail? Just allow yourself to experience that failure so that you can then move on from there.
Yeah, failure is a great teacher.
Absolutely.
And over time, you can learn to appreciate that it's not such a bad thing.
Right.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything that I haven't asked you anything else that you'd like to say that maybe we haven't talked about or that I haven't asked you about?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind actually goes back to what I said during my introduction, that, I've been in this program for about 4.5, 5 years, and I'm just slowly making my progress through the belt ranks. And when I look on some of the Facebook group questions and things like that, people are sometimes they feel like they have to progress as fast as possible. Like, for instance, in the Shotokan program, the first several levels, it's 36 logged hours of training time. And as soon as they hit that 36 hour, they're ready to take their test. And I would just encourage everyone to just kind of slow down and take your time with it. Obviously, if your goal is to reach your black belt as fast as possible, then that you have to work within that framework. But I think we do ourselves a much better favor if we take our time and understand everything that we're going through and everything that we're working on. And when you hit that 30, I've always looked at it as when I hit that 36-hour mark, that's where I'm ready to start evaluating myself. I'll put in the 36 hours for whatever it is to that point on tweaking the techniques, but I don't start evaluating myself fully until I hit that point. And then if it takes me another 10, 12, 20 hours, I think my longest time before I took a test was something like 58 trained hours, then that's how long it takes. But I know that when I'm ready to submit that test, I'm as ready as I'm going to be. And that just came through experience and time. So if I can help one person not feel like they have to rush through the program, then that's kind of my advice here.
Yeah. Again, sage advice. Listen to what Brian's saying. Brian, again, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate you just kind of opening up your experience and your life to us and sharing that. And I wish you all the best and many successes to come in the program.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you again for this opportunity.
All right, Brian, take care.
All right, you too.
Welcome to the Global Martial Arts University. My name is Michael Hodge, and I'm the director of the GMAU. For more than a decade, we have worked passionately towards creating the world's best way to learn martial arts at home. Thousands of students from more than 40 different countries around the world have experienced the GMAU's unique and transformational training. Our completely guided courses take the guesswork out of learning and training, as our instructors guide you, give you feedback, and push you to be your best. The most gratifying thing for me is seeing our students succeed, whether that means entering and winning a tournament, or attending one of our local facilities and looking just as good as the other students in the class, or losing weight and strengthening their bodies. All of these are different ways that students have been able to be successful and become a better version of themselves through the power of the martial arts. This is your time. Make your home your dojo. The GMAU is your school, and we're here to help you become a success. It's time to train. Let's do it.